Typhoon Koinu continues towards southern China on today's Tropical Weather Bulletin. And now the latest around the wide world of tropics. Tropical Weather Bulletin for October 5th. So Koinu made a very close pass to the southern tip of Taiwan yesterday and is now a weakening storm, but still a high-end Category 2. It's doing fairly well. We also have two storms in the western hemisphere, Philippe and Lydia, tropical storm warnings now in effect in Bermuda. We're still code red, but first of all, the Atlantic, day 127 of hurricane season. We've got Philippe, of course, which is still looking dreadful, really, and a 40% area of interest now in the eastern Atlantic that could end up developing in the coming days. Well, in the eastern Pacific, you already saw a glimpse of it, a 70% chance now in the easternmost part of the ocean. Day 143 of hurricane season here. Lydia's only slightly stronger, and that 70% system could visit Mexico as well. Both of them could end up there, and another area of interest to the west, a 20% chance that shouldn't form. Koinu moving on towards the coast of China slowly but surely. It is still quite close to Taiwan. We've got a 30% chance just west of Guam and a 70% chance now over the eastern Micronesian islands. That's probably going to head towards the northern Marianas, and models are really quite anticipating something big to occur out of that system, at least in size, if not in strength. In the North Indian Ocean, things looking fairly quiet here. Still some residual showers occurring over the Ganges River Delta in Bangladesh, but not too much going on. So Koinu is still a Category 2, 110 miles per hour on our latest estimate, and typhoon warnings remain in effect. It is 130 kilometers from Kaohsiung City, 242 from Dongshan Island, 279 from Xiamen, 287 from Shantou, and 396 from Shanwei along the coast of China. There are orange typhoon warnings for large parts of the coast along the east, including for Guangzhou, located at the top of that image there, and yellow typhoon warnings extending as far west as Nan'ao. This is Philippe, and you can see it's moving away from land areas at the minute, but tropical storm warning in effect to its north for Bermuda, and it is 878 kilometers away. Sounds like a long way, but it is speeding up. 1529 from Cape Hatteras, which it shouldn't get to. 1916 from Nantucket, which it should also miss. 2163 from Yarmouth, Nova Scotia, that could be a possible location for it. And 2263 for Halifax. 40 miles per hour only right now from this storm, and that's according to the National Hurricane Center, and they expect a 50-knot peak. Here's the latest satellite imagery showing the progression of Typhoon Koinu, maintaining a lot of its intensity because it didn't make a really big landfall on Taiwan. I mean to say it just skimmed across the southern tip, which means that it avoided the worst effects of land interaction with the mountains, which can really tear apart storms. So it's still looking quite decent actually as it moves westwards there, and maybe a glimpse of potential re-intensification, I'm not sure. If we look at the radar, it is of course very fragmented, but maybe it is starting to open up a bit of an eye feature again. Of course that eye hasn't really disappeared, but its movement continues westwards. Southern China really needs to watch out. Now this is Philippe, looking very poor in my view. It can barely even, I don't even know if you can make out if it's got a centre of circulation, but lots of convection occurring on the eastern side, which is being very heavily sheared still. That's really been the story of Philippe throughout pretty much its whole life, a tale of very high wind shear woes and the storm barely managing to keep a hold of itself. I'm not sure whether it can be classified right now. And this is Lydia, which is actually looking pretty decent in the face of wind shear as well, really blowing up massive amounts of convection in the last few hours there, which you saw being able to push away well out towards the south. So looking pretty good, 50 miles per hour at least I would say for this storm right now as it gradually moves towards the northwest, and another one where it's very undecided on where exactly it's going to go. The National Hurricane Center's cone is pretty large. Sea surface temperatures where Lydia is right now are pretty good, around 30 degrees Celsius, maybe a tad higher in one or two spots. In the Atlantic, also looking very good in the Gulf of Mexico and in the Western Caribbean. Where Philippe is right now though, those temperatures will start to drop a little bit more, around 28-29 degrees Celsius. By the time it reaches Bermuda, it'll be around 27, and after that it will turn post-tropical quite quickly, you would think, with those lowering sea surface temperatures after that. Western Pacific still very warm, boiling in fact in a few spots there in the Philippine Sea and further east. Where Koinu is, it's around 28 to 29 degrees Celsius. If it does push further southwards, it may surprise us for a little bit in holding on that intensity a little bit longer, but it is going to be a tale of weakening from here on out. And the North Indian Ocean, Bay of Bengal along the coast there, looking good, 28 to 30 degrees Celsius. And quite a similar story now in the Arabian Sea, which is really starting to quickly warm up. Southwest Indian Ocean still got some work to do before the season starts up again there. In the Australian region though, doing a decent job with those temperatures getting up towards 30 degrees Celsius in one or two spots off the coast of Western Australia. South Pacific also warming up as well, with a few spots off Vanuatu now to 27-28 degrees, and the northern tip of Fiji. Compared to average, the Western Pacific is mostly above average, apart from a big cool spot caused by Koinu. In the Eastern Pacific, still that area of cooler than average waters, but the eastern part of the basin very warm and the El Nino effect quite prominent. The Atlantic also looking very good, of course. Gulf of Mexico particularly, we've still got to watch out over there, and the Caribbean. Really a lot of energy untapped over there, and this speaks for itself. The oceanic heat content through the roof for large parts of the Caribbean Sea, even more than it was at peak season, I think. Gulf of Mexico also quite decent. Eastern Pacific, a few spots looking good there as well, although Lydia is going to be exiting that zone pretty shortly. Western Pacific also looking very good over a large area there, with moderate to high amounts of energy in the Philippine Sea. So let's check the GFS computer model then. Does it have any hope for Philippe? Well, what happens here is that it sort of branches out into two systems briefly and then becomes one again after Bermuda, and then goes and swipes into the coast of Nova Scotia, or even possibly a Maine landfall there. But it is not going to be tropical by the time it gets there, and that could actually happen maybe even when it reaches Bermuda. But rest assured, I shouldn't say rest assured, but seriously, there is going to be tropical storm force winds in Bermuda, and probably storm force winds in the northeastern United States and Atlantic Canada. So look at the Eastern Pacific then, we've got Lydia panning off towards the west and possibly becoming a hurricane later on the GFS, but the models have actually toned down both of these two systems. You may remember in previous updates where they had both of them becoming substantial hurricanes of at least Category 2 each, but Lydia there barely getting to Category 1 and weakening later on as it gets closer to Mexico, and that second system only just starting to form on day 5. Western Pacific, Koinu holds on to more intensity as it moves off towards the west there, quite close to Hong Kong. They could get tropical storm force winds, and then this enormous system starting to appear before the end of that 5-day period. First of all, there's Koinu once again along that southern coast of China, very small and compact towards the end there. May not even give Hong Kong tropical storm force winds, but it is close for comfort, and that large system afterwards. Alright, now looking at rainfall expectations, most of it is finished for Taiwan, but we're still expecting a little bit more on top of what we've seen from this storm, so maybe up to 8 inches of further rainfall in some mountain areas of Taiwan, 200 millimeters. Along the coast of China and Hong Kong, it's going to be very close, but some extreme coastal areas may receive 10 inches of rain there, 250 millimeters, and also from another area of interest that will be moving through the Philippines and on towards Vietnam next week, that could cause quite a lot of rainfall even if it doesn't form there, up towards 18 inches. That could also be caused by Koinu actually, depending on which way these two systems go, but a lot of rainfall there that probably won't be associated with an actual cyclone, but there it is nonetheless, getting up towards 500 millimeters. In the Atlantic next week, we could see a brief system in the eastern region there into the Maine development region, although it doesn't look particularly good on this latest model run. Earlier model runs had higher hopes for this system, but it's still got a decent chance of developing in that 7-day period. That's why we're giving it a 40%. And there it is. It would be a tropical storm, might recurve later on, shouldn't affect any land areas. That makes things very uncomplicated in the Atlantic, which is good news. In the Eastern Pacific, then, these two systems could still pose a risk to the coast of Mexico, certainly. 2 tropical storm landfalls there, strong ones probably at that. So it's interesting to see what will happen with all of that now, but the good news is that is a big climb down from previous model runs, maybe a borderline hurricane landfall for Lydia there further north, and that second system, a quick spin-up storm, might still get to strong tropical storm status before it makes landfall there. I think that's in Guerrero province. And this enormous typhoon that forms near the Northern Mariana Islands grows and gets much stronger as well there, probably a Category 4 peak. This has been forecasted for several days now in one form or another, but the good news on this one is that it does stay pretty far away from major land areas. The Northern Mariana Islands mainly unpopulated, and some of those Japanese islands will get tropical storm force winds as well, and off it goes, becoming a very powerful extratropical cyclone headed for Alaska by the end of that 10-day period. Scan the barcode and that will take you to the Force 13 merch store, where you can take a look at all of our items, including full season and individual storm animations on request, and are still waiting for Hone t-shirts, which are still waiting to be dismissed because we can't wait to get rid of them after Hone forms. Well, in the silly range then, could it be a Hone? Well, I don't know, but there is a little system there pushing on towards the west in the middle to late part of the month, but I think that's still in the Eastern Pacific there, so possibly a brief small tropical storm, but that's really all there is to look at in the Eastern Pacific. Maybe another weak low pressure system there to its east as well, but usually at this time of year the Eastern Pacific is starting to shut down in the late October. So we'll have to see what happens there, but chance of Hone unlikely, and certainly nothing in the Atlantic in that long range period. Also in the silly range, looking at the Western Pacific, 2 systems forming, one in the Gulf of Mexico, a brief one up there towards the northeast, but certainly one that could cause a messy situation in Vietnam towards the 18th, 19th of October there, moving inland. There's a very broad system, and those are the kinds that can often cause substantial flooding, especially those ones at this time of year. They are all too common. There's another one making landfall along the central part of Vietnam. To be honest though, that was quite timid for a super long range section, but that is it. You can take a look at our Discord server for tropical weather and general weather chat from all around the world with our members, discord.gg/force13. Well then, what happened on this day? It was 10 years ago to the day when we had a surprisingly damaging Category 2 typhoon, Fito, which caused billions of dollars in damages, I can't remember how much now, along the coast and inland over China, I think it was. It was near its peak today, just off the coast of Taiwan, and we also had Category 1 Danas, which was rapidly strengthening at this point as well, would become quite a powerful storm in its own right. We also had Tropical Storm Karen in the Atlantic, about to die out, one that people remember for being forecasted pretty badly, it has to be said, and it didn't even make it to the coast of the United States before dissipating. Back to today though, we are still code red, seriously concerned about Koinu. In the Atlantic, the next name is Sean. In the Eastern Pacific, it will be Max, and in the Central Pacific, as well publicised, it is Hone. 63 storms so far this year. Bit of a climb to get to 92 for the average per year, but I think it's been more quality over quantity this time around. The next name in the Western Pacific is Balavan. In the North Indian Ocean, it will be Tej. And upcoming in the Southern Hemisphere, another season as well. Jasper's next up in the Australian region. Alvaro will kick off the Southwest Indian Ocean season. And in the South Pacific, our next name is Lola. That's all from today's Tropical Weather Bulletin. We'll be back again tomorrow.